Hello, and welcome to a new edition of Education is the Best Medicine. And thanks for watching. Remember, community public access is your best bet. Watch it whenever you can. I want to thank everyone for support and tuning in. And we're going to expand this thing and make it better. I'm going to be working with the owner of the channel, Mr. Adamology, in regards to making sure we have this Zoom thing back. And I need to understand before anyone else can understand. So, education is the best medicine. So, I'd like to welcome you to the show. If you haven't met before, I'm George Pearson, I'm a physician's assistant. I've been practicing about 43 years. And my certification is family practice, but also done much work in internal medicine, behavioral health, and substance abuse. And just general quality of life. Now, we're into a preventative mode in health, and so hopefully we'll be emphasizing more issues to keep you healthy and wealthy, and taking care of yourself. Well, I want to talk a little bit about words. Words do matter, and they have consequences. And I think that over the period of time in the last couple of weeks, we understand now, in some cases, words can get you killed. And so I went through GPT chat and my research as I do this. Again, nothing is done alone. We try to be evidence-based and supportive in our information. So I implore you to look up these things and see what you find. And if it's different than what I find, call me and let me know. So I asked, this: the words, where did the phrase come, words matter, or closely related to, like, words have meaning or have consequence? Doesn't come from a single original coinage, as the GPT comments. It's a recurring idea in philosophy, politics, and rhetoric across the centuries. Here are some of the roots and why I think they're important. Stay with me now, okay? The philosophical roots, Ludwig Wittgenstein. Now, look here. Whenever I'm talking about the discussions of the philosophical roots, they are African in origin. Whatever you're reading, being educated by, math, all of these have an African origin. The great Greek philosophers were educated by the African scholars. So just a word of a setup. It says, so philosophical roots. Ludwig Wittgenstein, spelled Wittgenstein. He was born from 1889 to 1951. That's about 4 years before I was born. He passed. In a philosophy of language, he emphasized that the way we use words shapes meaning and reality. The limits of language means the limits of the world. And I would say language, not English. So in the diversity of language, let's understand that in different cultures, language could have a different meaning. That's why you have to be kind of sensitive to cultures and tradition and historical concepts, because you may say a word in American that in Asia or Africa or Mexico or China or anywhere would be disrespectful. So this is why we have to be careful with our words, because words do matter. And a speech act theory by J.L. Austin in 1962 showed that words are not just performative. I now pronounce you married. This formalized the idea that language carries consequences. Yeah. I now pronounce you married, man and wife, death do you part. Okay. So some of the political usages is the phrase "words matter," as more recently by President Barack Obama in his 20,800 campaign frequently said, "Don't tell me words don't matter," in response to critics of his rhetoric, stressing that political language shapes thoughts and actions, that we just saw this last week with Mr. Kirk. And we're going to talk about him too. I am not an advocate of political violence, but it's as American as apple pie. Journalists and civil rights leaders have long echoed the idea that words can incite violence or inspired change. Example, Martin Luther King's speeches, Malcolm X's rhetoric, warnings about language and power. So from an African census, from an African American census, we know what words mean from 1619 on. The documents that shaped us, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And the Constitution, 1776, is significantly important because understand that African Americans then become 3/5 of a human being. Words do matter. They have consequence. And some of the contemporary framings, like what we're doing now, today the phrase is widely used in discussions about hate speech, political rhetoric, and media responsibility, especially when leaders' words lead to real-world actions such as violence, discrimination, or policy shifts. In academia, the idea also tied to critical race theory and feminist theory, which highlight how language perpetuates the challenges of systems of power. So to answer this directly, I guess, the concept of words that have meaning and consequence comes from a philosophy of language and the popular political slogan "Words Matter," popularized by Barack Obama in the late 2000s through civil rights leaders and others expressed the sentiment long before. And so I kind of want to understand, in terms of words do matter, in terms of Black intellectual history, how language shapes power, freedom, and survival. And here's some lineage, again, put to you by GTP Chat. And I phrased the question, I said, words do matter. And I have related my experience as African American and understand nothing is new under the sun. What are we experiencing now? I say in the context of 1619, that's why I asked GBT Chat. Words have mattered to us, whether it be in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights or in the Civil Rights Act. How do they matter? And here's the connection. Enslavement in abolition in the abolition era. Frederick Douglass from 1818 to 1895. And if you don't know these people, you should. You should learn about them. The real world context and the ethics of this context and where we're dealing in terms of race, sex, gender, go back to 1619. And an individual's right for freedom to be and have a family, to have free travel, to not be harassed, to not be arrested, to have their freedoms taken away from them. And we're seeing it today. We're seeing it today when policies that blankly target people are utilized with no discretionary thought. And when that happens, people are arrested at their jobs, pulled off the streets. Think about Germany under Hitler. Think about African slaves in 1619 and forward. Words do matter. And does argue the power of language. He described how slaveholders tried to keep enslaved people illiterate because words, reading, speaking, writing would give them access to freedom and self-definition. In speeches, Douglass showed that words like slave or property dehumanized, while his own oratory humanized Black people and exposed the hypocrisy in American democracy. Words do matter. And just think about it. Remember, in this country, again, in relationships to words do matter, that there was a point in time that African Americans, it was illegal for them to learn, to read, and to write. One of our first authors was a Black female, Phyllis Wheatley. I think it was a book of poems too, by the way. That was revolutionary for her to just write a book in slave America. Sojourner Truth, 1719 to 1883, her feminist oratory, Ain't I a Woman? A speech framed the language of womanhood and race, showing how words could dismantle double standards. And if you haven't read that speech, I had to go over it again. I've got to read it again. She said, ain't I a woman? Basically, you're saying, ain't I not a woman? Ain't I a woman? I have children. I've raised children. I've raised the slave master's children to the extent she worked as hard as any man did. And he says, ain't I a woman? Now, understand the context is that she was a ex-slave or a slave. In that context, she had to fight for her womanhood, which is the beauty of queens of African descent, even though she was enslaved. In the Harlem Renaissance, W.B. Du Bois emphasized the double consciousness of African Americans shaped by the words and narratives imposed by white society versus their own self-definition. He knew reclaiming language and narratives was essential for liberation. And so in this particular time frame now, we're seeing the absence of that. We're seeing destruction of education, of science, of documentation, of truth. And thereby not having that truth, you have to believe in a lie. And that lie says that puts us at the bottom. That makes us not important. That says that I do not matter. Charlie Kirk. Words do matter. James Baldwin. The Devil Finds Work and Other Essays. Baldwin, again, another titan of our community, a titan in America. Not just an African American, but a global titan. The Devil Finds Work and Other Essays. Oh, he was a gay male. He made no bones about that. His book, Giovanni Corner, talks about him and quite naturally the abuse and trauma that he had to go saw his personality and sexuality. I always tell folks that the two men that got me into medicine was a gay physician and a gay/nurse. Both men of color. Proud to call them my friends. You don't decide who helps you move or ascend through your levels. God decides that. And whoever he puts into your life, you have to accept him and keep it moving. And not be so judgmental. Again, in this world right now, we are judgmental and we lack empathy. The two things I see missing. And in medicine, we're judgmental and we lack empathy. The Civil Rights Era, Black Power. This is Believe Radio, 24-hour inspirational gospel music channel. My name is George Pearson. I'm a physician assistant and practice community. Please support community radio. Our voices need to be heard. We have to always, if we don't tell our story, someone else will tell it for us. And that's what they've done. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. His origin was built on the convention of words could inspire nonviolent change. I have a dream, reframe the American promise in moral terms, and also warned that words of hatred and difference carried real consequences in fueling violence and oppression. Now, if King were alive today, what would he be thinking? How would he be feeling? Because before he was assassinated, words do matter. Before he was assassinated, he was moving. He had spoken about the strike by the garbage workers for more money, for respect, for work conditions. And believe you me, the power structure at that time just wanted him to shut up. But he wouldn't. And subsequently, words mattered for him when he was murdered in the steps of a hotel, in a hotel balcony. Think about the parallels of James Earl, and we don't know if he really did it. We always think conspiracy stuff. From a distance shoots this individual. The attempted assassination of Trump from a distance. And most recently, what's interesting about the murder of Mr. Kirk, the young man who shot him from a distance of 150 feet. Size of a book football field plus 50. So he had to be pretty good. He had to be a marksman or had studied because he used a long bore rifle. He used a short bore rifle with a scope. You have to be kind of sophisticated to do that. I was in the military. It took me a long time to learn how to do it. That's why I don't like guns. Malcolm X spoke about the power of words and reclaiming identity. He rejected Negro seemed as imposed and insisted on black as a word of pride. His speeches emphasized that language either reinforces oppression or awakens resistance. Words do matter. Black feminists thought. I'm glad that they brought this one up. Audre Lorde, her affirmance quote, "Your silence will not protect you." She believed words were weapons of survival and silence, withholding words could be deadly. In the transformation of science into language and action, she argued that the speaking truth, even risky, speaking truth, even when risky, is essential for freedom. I did a thing in the intro about not losing your voice. Have to speak up in the midst of oppression. Have to speak up in the midst of people doing the wrong things. Have to speak up when you're being used as a guinea pig. You have to speak up. More than any other group, black women bear the brunt of speaking up. Any civil rights demonstration in the 60s, black women were there. They were the support as well being out in front. Bell hooks. Now, I must admit, I had not heard of these women, which shows you we all got something to learn. And that the power of information to bring these women to life. We should know them. We should honor them. We should respect them. Bell hooks wrote extensively about language of incited resistance. For her, reframing words like love, feminism, and blackness was a radical act against white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. Words do matter. In the contemporary movement, Black Lives Matter. The very name, Black Lives Matter, is an assertion of words matter. It reframes the struggle for justice into a simple, undeniable truth. Critics tried counterphrases, all lives matter, blue lives matter, proving how much power naming and language carry in the shaping of public conscience. For me, is Million Man March. I went to two of them, one with my father, one without him. He had passed at that time. And it was almost like a clarion call to go back. And in both times we went to the Capitol, no one was shot, no one was killed. We didn't storm the Capitol. We didn't defecate over everything. We left the place cleaner. And the minister, Mr. Farquhar, made sure. He only said it once. Please honor folk, honor the environment. They're looking. The whole world's watching. I'm never saying that. It was a hot day, and man, it was beautiful. Washington D.C. can be a beautiful place sometimes. Yeah. The takeaway across American history, thinkers and actors consistently insist the words have weight. They can enslave, liberate, erase, affirm, incite violence, or inspire justice, or they can get you killed. It's difficult to pin down a single age. And so I got into these two young men, Mr. Kirk and the shooter. I made the assumption they were both the same age, but, of course, GPT chat corrected me. But I kind of wanted to understand, we think killing is just killing. And this is the data that was available. And I think that why do words matter? Because I pulled this in a discussion about Mr. Kirk. First of all, let me say that there's no place for violence related to a person's race, sex, gender, or what they do or how they speak and who they speak on. But it's not the case anymore. Words do matter. They've always mattered. And we're not careful, we're going to be the victim of those words. I guess this is brought to mind. I was watching news and just trying to pull things together in the full for the show. Murders in the ages 20 to 24. I said, let me think about it. Let's do some research on that. So there are some relevant data points. In 2023, there were 3,013 murders in the U.S., more individuals between ages 20 and 24. Small age range, small gap. If you listen to the news, everybody's being killed. Everybody's being murdered. They've been saying consistently, crime is down. In Oakland, definitely. Again, perception, words matter. The National Violent Death Reporting System in 2022 said about there were probably about 2,295 homicide deaths across the U.S. Homicide rates are highest in young groups. For example, age 20 to 24. My goodness. So, our young are killing our young. And why this is important? Because a white young man kills another young white man. And the access to guns. As my mom would say, he should have had a book or something, but decided to have a gun. That's not the way to do things. We always talk about the power of education. Again, we have a discussion around lack of education, lack of science, and acceptance. Discussion that more folks are not getting college degrees in an area where we've got IT and AI, where you need to be as smart as you can. Interesting enough, Mr. Kirk only had a high school diploma. And was very, very rich for his dogma. Words do matter. And that's what folks want. They want dogma. They don't want truth. So, and what was missing from the numbers? This is a breakdown of offenders from each group, age 65 or 20 to 65. Because the data is not that good in a given year, because there are always breaks with younger versus older. So we know that we assume similar numbers in the ages 25 through 29, 30, and 34. So from 34 on to 20, that's where most of the murders are occurring. Not the splashy stuff you see on TV where them going to the house and everyone's dead. Those are not the numbers. They're part of this number piece, but not the real numbers. Age 20 to 24 is about 3,000 murders. Age 25 to 34, 5,000 to 6,000 murders. To two age groups, maybe 2,500 to 3,000, less than 1,000 in these grouped categories of ages. We think our young people are going crazy. They're not. We are a fear-mongering community right now. We want to place the blame. We want that. They want that picture of violence to be a young African American or old African American or a person of color. Here's why it took so long for them to find Mr. Kirk's murder, because they weren't looking for him. They were looking for me or somebody that looked like me. I didn't see any of us there. I didn't see us there at that event. And if they were very light-skinned. Again, we're at this thing and we see this young kid murdered. He's young because I'm 70, so he's a young kid to me. And we see young white females crying and, oh, he was so great. And I said, well, who is this guy? So, then summing it up in a ballpark figure, maybe 10 to 15,000 offenders aged 20 to 65 in a year. That's who kills. And they say it's a rough estimate. Again, that's why I want to know as a setup to Charlie Kirk and this apparent shooter who I said was the same age and same ideology. And I have to admit to you, I had never heard of Charlie Kirk, but he has been the conservative movement in the last 8 years, probably even before he built a whole network of for young conservative white folk. And he was really responsible for getting out the young vote. And you see him at the seat of power. I'd never seen him. I never focused on him, but he was there. And I had to think about how important the world needs to know who he was. And for him to jump so many levels to be at the feet of the president bodes well for the, and must probably be developed and groomed to be one of the future leaders. It's astounding. And it brought me to thinking about what were we dealing with? Why is all this sadness about an individual who, unfortunately, again, no condemnation, was murdered? Again, a small percentage of people are murdered in America in his age group. So I guess totally issue. So who's Charlie Kirk? He's a conservative commentator and the founder of Turning Point. USA was shot and killed in September 2025 during an appearance at the Utah Valley University, Delaware. Governor Matt Ryan, in coordination with the president of the White House, have ordered flags to be flown at half staff until sunset on September 14th. Man. In his life, he was one of the most visible young voices of the American right. So the right's conservative, the left is liberal. So when you ever hear that right, you're talking about conservative, left, you're talking about, quote, liberal or progressive. It's the opposite, right? He's known for his sharp attacks on liberal policies, higher education, and what he saw as the excesses of woke culture. But among his most controversial moments were things he said or implied about Black people, race, and civil rights. These remarks shaped many communities, especially Black Americans, have viewed him. So that's why I hadn't heard of him, because I'm not on his side. If you got to pick a side. So what was he said? You know, what were the conversations that he had about African Americans? The Black pilot remark in 2024. In January 2024, Kirk sparked outrage when he said he saw a Black pilot. He hoped he's qualified. Many interpreted the remark as perpetuating stereotypes and questioned competence of Black folk, Black professionals. It was in Newsweek. He became one of the most widely criticized statements. Okay, well, I'll give him one. People can talk. Again, words do matter. And why you hadn't heard of Charlie Kirk, because what he was saying, if you heard it in a true context, this is one of the foundations of the president of Trump's message to America. A folded ideology of some of the most concerning and dark behavior and thoughts that America has said they tried to hide from, but in this last election ran toward. So I don't blame Charlie Kirk, because he can say what he wants to say. I blame the 75% of Americans that voted in last year's election. Interesting, right? Words do matter. So denial of white privilege and DEI. Kirk frequently dismissed the concept of white privilege, calling it a racist lie. He was leading critic of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, arguing that they unfairly prioritize race over merit and frame America as a systemic racist. That's kind of interesting, because the very concept of America was built on enslavement of African Americans. That denotes their privilege and their economic power for 300 years or plus that. You even count Reconstruction and everything up to the civil rights era, African American life was controlled on all levels due to institutional structural racism. What kind of woke is that? So, that's number 2. Here's one that really kind of has you thinking. Scratch you. Martin Luther King Jr. and civil rights. Kirk stirred backlash when he criticized Dr. Martin Luther King, calling him awful and not a good person. He also said the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a huge mistake, claiming it created a bureaucracy that undermined constitutional freedoms. Words do matter. Actions do matter. So now we understand some of the philosophical underpinnings of the Trump America. No one's talking about this. They're kind of cantonizing him, making him a saint. Like he was defenseless. And nothing that he did should have constituted him being murdered. And I agree with it, but words do matter. They've been used throughout America to suppress African Americans and people of color. Critical race theory. Now you're hearing all this. Gee, is the president, was Trump wise enough to kind of have read about this and researched it? And of course it wasn't. Of course he wasn't. But he benefited from him. And it was like a clarion call when he talked about these things over the trail. Because it's the dark side of America, or the white side of America, depending on how you look at it. That's the deep discussion now, to see the formulator of the philosophies, the context in which these discussions of thought were molded into a campaign philosophy. And this is what he talked about on the trail. You notice that we never ever saw a full campaign exposure when he did his talk around America. I remember Trump in the early, had an agitator in the crowd. He's telling them take him out and beat him up, basically, and he'd pay for the lawyers. Words do matter. Critical race theory. Kirk launched the Exposing Critical Race Theory tour to his compose. So he's on college campuses having these conversations with young white folk and those that ally with the discussion that the white male is being discriminated against. He who runs the system is being discriminated against. So he's at this was one of them. He was in the middle before he's murdered. He do another tour through America. And I just heard some of his wife said that basically retribution, basically an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That they don't know what has been unleashed, was the comment. Words do matter. She just lost a husband. I can understand her grief. But instead of healing, she talks about retribution. Words matter. Demographics and race politics. On immigration and demographics, Kirk claimed that Democrats were pursuing policy intended to diminish white demographics. Critics link this rhetoric to so-called Great Replacement theory, a conspiracy narrative often associated with white nationalist circles. You will not replace me. You will not replace me. Remember what those gentlemen and women were shouting in the night with their torches? You will not replace me. So at the foundations of this are an insecure and powerful community about their existence. And yeah, they have something to worry about because in the next 25 years, they will be the minority because they're just not having enough babies. Whose fault is that? Oh, what we're going to do is make sure women can't have abortions in the states that we run so we can pump up our numbers. Numbers game. You will not replace me. Words matter. Black women in affirmative action. Now, I've gotten a 6. I went to GBTAT and I asked them to give me 10. I got 6 already. This is why you haven't heard of Mr. Kirk, but you have heard because that's what Trump was talking about throughout his campaign. Mr. Kirk had been with Trump since the beginning. He came on. He spoke at one of the conventions. He was being groomed as a star. And he was very rich in this context. I think the organization is worth $100 million, clear, free and clear, with all the people he has working for him, all the tax write-off, living a very good life, spouting these kinds of discussions, spouting this fear, spouting this race hate, based hate, spouting minimization of other people. And he's not a nice person because he didn't want to share. Black women in affirmative action. Kirk asserted that prominent black women, including Joe Reed, Kenyatta Brown Jackson, the Supreme Court, Sheila Jackson Lee, Michelle Obama, only advanced due to affirmative action, claiming they lacked the brain processing power to take seriously otherwise had to steal a white person's slot. Critics described the remarks as exploitative, racist, and reflective of a long-standing attacks on black achievement. Are we hearing about Mr. Kirk now? Do we kind of understand what you understand why we in the sights of someone that did not like his rhetoric and felt it offensive and attacked them personally? Words matter. Legacy of controversy. Charlie Kirk's death was sparked a wave of reflection. Supporters are remembering him as a bold truth teller, unafraid to confront liberal orthodoxy. But critics, particularly within the black community, remember him as someone who minimized systemic racism, disparaged civil rights icons, and reinforced racial stereotypes. Sounds like somebody we should have heard of, but we didn't. Well, you won't hear about him if only that circle's talking about him. And if only in that circle he's important, only in that circle he's raised up. Again, if you look at some of the early and back pictures, he's in the background. He picked the vice president. Trump didn't pick his vice president. That young man did. J.D. Vance was unfortunately a nobody. And not very articulate, by the way. That's who Trump needed as a vice president. Anyone else would have had problems. You notice you don't see him that much, right? You see him in photo ops, and he needs to break a vote, but he don't say that much because he can't. He better not. So, who was Charlie Kirk? Charlie Kirk was 31 years old. The alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson, was 22. And no, they're not the same age. There's a 9-year age gap. Charlie Kirk's ideology, what he stood for and how he operated and why he became significant. Well, I just told you why he did, but let's talk about it in summary. Conservative right-wing populism. Kirk was a conservative political activist and media personality. He was especially aligned with the populist right movement in the U.S. He supported Donald Trump, framed many of his arguments. I told you he did. Trump is not that smart. He's an avatar for 75% of Americans that voted for him. That's who Trump is. He represents America. And you have to be willing to say truth to a wicked man in a wicked place and time. And often it was focused on cultural battlegrounds. He supported Donald Trump, framed many of his arguments around anti-establishment sentiments. All right, I'm the outsider. I'm going to drain the swamp. He wasn't that smart to bring anything. This Kirk brought this stuff together in an intellectual fashion because he was a media expert and he knew how to push people's buttons, particularly white people's buttons. They're coming after you. They're going to take your daughter and rape your wife and kill your dog. Focus on young people on campuses. A big part of his effort was to mobilize young conservatives, especially on college campuses. He founded Turning Point US in 2012. It is now 2025. From nothing to $100 million organization. Because someone has to put out the poison. Someone has to pump the brakes on folk. So the good white folks will be saved. He focuses a majority of his efforts on mobilizing young conservatives, and especially on college campuses. He founded Turning Point in US 2012. He was still young, and the organization sought to counter what he had his supporters as a liberal, left-leaning dominance in educational settings. That's why they attack on education now. That's why they attack on colleges now. He's a purveyor of that. Remember, he did not have a college education. He directly went to Turning Point and started pushing this organization, pushing this, pumping it. The arrogance, I'm smarter than you and I don't need a degree. That's the arrogance. I don't need to learn what you've learned about civility and sharing in the community that happens on a college campus, and you learn to live with somebody and work with somebody that's different from you. That's what I liked about public education in Oakland. The diversity of folks, the folks that I'm working with, went to school with now, are basically the folks that I take care of clinically. The use of media and rhetoric. Kirk was very media savvy. He used social media, podcasting, speaking tours, and viral debates. He was an adept at branding, framing opponents, and mobilizing people by highlighting polarizing issues. If one were to critique him, they might say he would sometimes use provocative statements to sharpen divisions. Think he was successful? Influence and significance. He was one of the more prominent voices of the American right, especially young conservatives. His organization, Turning Point, had significant reach in colleges, public policy successes, and youth political engagement. Because now I get why this young white woman was crying about his murder. That's what triggered me on this conversation, this talk. Because of his style, sometimes combative, he was prominent in polarized political environment. But political assassinations aren't anything new. It's American as apple pie. And so I asked the question, political assassination, how common are they and what does it mean when they occur? So political assassinations in the U.S. and politics. Political assassinations are uncommon but significant in the U.S. So it's not a big deal. It's just that it happens. We have to be on the discussion that it does happen. And in my era, and I understand, but historical, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. James Garfield was assassinated. William McKinley was assassinated. John F. Kennedy, all presidents were assassinated. Presidents targeted would survive. Andrew Jackson, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Gerald Ford, Ronald Reagan. Understand, and I want to point this out, that these are white men being shot by other white men. Civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers. These are black men shot by white men. Political figures, Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X, shot by black men. And there's a whole discussion around that. Harvey Milk, shot by a white man. So, there aren't that many political assassinations, but when they happen, they have a deep impact because that's leadership being murdered. Now, What does it mean for African Americans? I ask that violence is a means of control and intimidation African Americans experienced in 1619. For African Americans, violence was historically not rare. It was systemic, normalized, and used to enforce racial hierarchy, enforce the order. From 1619 to 1865, slave patrols and whippings. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that we have African Americans have a great history of being beat up, murdered, imprisoned, wrongly accused, lynched. Join the club. Words matter. Slave patrols and whippings. Enslaved Africans were controlled through brutal corporal separation, executions for resistance, rebellion suppression. That term rebellion in 1831 was crushed with mass killings of enslaved people, sending a message of terror. An eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? Reconstruction and Jim Crow. I tell you, we got a good experience of political assassination and trauma. Political terror. After emancipation, black leaders and voters were often assassinated for political participation. So involving yourself in the process usually can get you murdered. That's why it's been a fear of voting for us, because we saw people lynched and killed just for the right to vote. Poll tax, lynchings. So the murder of Charlie Kirk is a drop in the bucket. We have a long history of assassinations, of murder, of our leaders being taken in their prime by someone not us and told to get over it. I just think it's apropos that a person like Martin Luther King is murdered who preached nonviolence. Charlie Kirk didn't preach nonviolence. Read about who he is and who he was. And we didn't talk about him because we didn't think that America would go in that direction, but they did. Full blown. 75% of folks voted for Trump. I'm not going to say anything about the sexual issue going on, but it's been a large cover up. And the reason why they don't want to release the information because so many people were a part of not only the money train, but the sex train. And the fact that America elected a felon and someone accused of sexual inappropriateness like E.J. Carroll, and who she now has been validated in her suit. Welcome to America. And it's just getting started because as this information comes out, you're going to see how much folks were intertwined in this and either want to suppress it or making money from it or were probably in the case of Epstein had information and documentation that probably would be very painful for folks. Same with Puffy. He had videos all in his house. See how quiet that stuff is now? And I don't know if he got a sweetheart deal, but that's what happened to Epstein. That's what money would do. That's what power would do. The civil rights leader, Medgar Evers, civil rights leader assassinated in Mississippi, bombing the 16th Street Baptist Church, 1963. We've all suppressed these memories because they're so painful. But this is a categorically call on political violence in America. As American as apple pie. Words matter. Martin Luther King in 1968, assassinated for challenging segregation and systemic racism and economics. That's the one that's missing from GPT chat. He was murdered right after speaking to the garbage workers in regards to fair pay, working conditions. It's okay for him to fight about not being able to sit at a lunch counter, but not okay for us to strike for fair working conditions. And all the companies that remove DEI out of their work code, statement, business statement, you shouldn't support them. Why would you want to go to a place that will take your money but wouldn't let you work or let you climb up that ladder? Contemporary political violence and intimidation. Modern movements such as the Ferguson Progress, Black Lives Matter, point to ongoing state vigilance and violence as an intimidation, political threats. What's going on now? Let's bring it to 2025 and immigration and intimidation and pulling people off the streets and pulling people off their jobs and going to fields to arrest farm workers and families and mothers and daughters. Does it sound like the group of folks that, again, small numbers? It was driven on fear that immigration was bringing in a bunch of hostile criminals. And what they're finding, what I'm seeing is children, mothers, working men, folks reporting to their required assignments at court and then being arrested. Yeah. That happened to us. It's just a replay of an old playbook. The playbook of white patriarchal, white supremacy. That's what the playbook is about. In the African American experience, violence as political control has been systemic and persistent from slavery to Jim Crow to the present, used to suppress freedom, participation, and empowerment. And in my final piece, got about another 10 minutes. We're going to talk about discussion. And it's what we know about deaths and crashes. Why am I bringing this up? It says that it reported there was 633 deaths in 23 from crashes that were directly linked to drowsy driving. A study in the AAA Foundation and Traffic Safety covered from 2017 to 21 estimates that drowsy driving was involved in almost 30,000 deaths during that period. It averages out about 5,000 deaths per 5 to 6,000 deaths per year. That's a mother, that's a daughter, that's a father. The Sleep Foundation reports that 6,000 crashes per involved fatigue drive that result in one death. Driving factors is about 21% of fatal crash. So that not DUI, not drinking while driving, just sleeping, like I was. Almost fell asleep at the wheel. Had not taken into account my driving from going from 30-minute commute to an hour and a half. And subsequently, when your body says it's tired, it shuts off. Scary feeling. If I had been drinking or using alcohol, I probably could have killed myself easily. Because your reaction time slows. You're already tired and you have a substance aboard that slows your reaction and confuses you and changes your mentation. So you can't judge distance. Excuse me. I want to thank you for watching. Thank the Believe Radio staff. Thank Curtis for his work and help and support. Adam, I will be talking to you about doing the classes for Zoom. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And so the societal and economic cost of sleepy driving is estimated that fatigue-related fatal injury about $109 billion. Some articles say it's an underestimation, and it doesn't include property damage or the full cost or the loss of a wage earner. And the last piece, so in other words, get your rest, take care of yourself. Don't sleep, don't drive when you're tired. Get your rest if you got to do long commutes like I do. Don't take yourself for granted. So as I tell people, and some people are telling me, take care of yourself. You're important. So I think that that's something we need to learn. And in the end point, uh, I put on my Facebook page, brother here. Uh, he's a great black man, intelligent. He's got a book out, Reparations, Community Lion, and we're gonna have him on. He's gonna come down. He wants to come down to the station, so gonna get a hold of him. He's gonna talk about his book, Got Reparations. Did an interesting discussion. Brother's name Neil Bata Alul, spelled Menhuam Yelel, and he's a Oakland author, great African, loving brother. And speaking about health, as we close the show out, the top 10 chronic illnesses: obesity, high cholesterol, blood pressure, depression, diabetes, arthritis, heart disease, number one killer, asthma, chronic kidney disease. And what will a healthy lifestyle do for you? I put this on my Facebook page. See here, you can get it. And it's what Kaiser sent me. I'm a member of Kaiser. And I did get my general physical, did the blood work, did some heart stuff, just trying to keep it going. And basically it talks about what can you do for a healthy lifestyle. No smoking, serving 5 servings of fruits and vegetables. The 0, 5, 10, 30 rule. It's on a reset. It's stop smoking, 5 servings of fruits and veggies per day. I do mine in a shake, lots of water. Again, dehydration too is a problem with driving, so make sure you're hydrated well. Body mass index less than 30, which just can't be overweight. 25 BMI is the standard. Hey, most America, 3/4 of America, I'd say 50%, 60% obese, other 40% heading that way. And 150 minutes of exercise per week. Hey, the walk, the bicycle, you can do that. We can get this done. And again, physical activity, 150 minutes per week, moderate aerobic activity or its equivalent, strength training, flexibility, stretching, healthy weight management, preventive care and monitoring. Get your examinations, do your screenings. That's what Deion Sanders is talking about. That's what motivated me. Even as a clinician, you need motivation. So I do it every year. Make sure I got it done this year. I'm okay. I'm going to live another 10 years at least. If I don't kill myself driving. Hey, not do as I say and do as I do. Okay? Let's make it work. I want to thank you for tuning in. Really, really, really thank all the time. And just am appreciative of all the things folks do and take care of for me. We'll see you next week. Hope I want to have this brother on doing the reparations piece. I think he's going to be great. And stay peaceful and stay conscious.